Hi, I'm Tony Williams, and this is Brooklyn Savvy.
Hi, I'm Tony Williams, and welcome to Brooklyn Savvy. It is such a pleasure to have such wonderful women that are Brooklyn Savvy panelistas. We have Phyllis White-Thorne, who is an expert in trauma and just many things. She serves on a number of nonprofit boards. We have Dr. Maria De Longoria. She is a historian. She is a professor at Medgar Evers College. And we also have Jennifer Jones Austin, who is, words can barely describe the kind of work that she is doing and the impact that she is making in the social justice space. Jennifer Jones Austin is the president of FPWA, which I'm very proud to be on that board. So it's so wonderful to have these women that we can draw upon as resources for conversations. So on today's episode of Brooklyn Savvy, we're going to be talking about the Haitian Border Crisis. Now, by the time this show airs, who knows where we'll be in this conversation. But I think it's really important that we level set in terms of the information that Jennifer can share, having been someone who was asked to go down to Texas during this time. So Jennifer, if you can talk to us about your experience, first of all, why you went down to Texas, and then your experience while you were there.
Thanks for having me, and I'm glad to be with my fellow panelistas for this conversation. Back in September of 2021, I traveled with Reverend Al Sharpton, Reverend Frederick D. Haynes out of Dallas, Texas, Reverend Jamal Bryant out of Atlanta, Georgia, and Jonathan Jackson, who is the son of Jesse Jackson. We traveled to the Del Rio, Texas border, where more than 15,000 Haitian persons were awaiting their fate with respect to whether they'd be granted asylum or deported at the border and returned to Haiti. I traveled because I wanted to accompany Reverend Sharpton for two reasons. One, to lay eyes upon my brothers and sisters, people of a darker hue who have experienced great trauma and distress, both in their homeland country of Haiti and in other countries that they have traveled to and migrated to since the 2010 earthquake, and now are experiencing because they essentially have been shunned by those countries, Brazil and Chile and other Latin American and Central American countries, to lay eyes upon them and to learn what they were experiencing, but also to have them lay eyes upon me as a Black woman concerned about their well-being. Lay eyes upon Reverend Al Sharpton to know that a leader such as Reverend Al Sharpton is here in this nation and in the world is concerned about their well-being.
So talk to us about what you witnessed while you were there.
So it's interesting. It's been a little while since I was there, but I'm gonna be honest and say that I'm still shaken by what I saw. It was hard for me to believe that I literally was standing in the United States of America and witnessing what I witnessed. So let me first tell you that when we deboarded the plane in Del Rio, Texas, we were met by some white men who attempted, and I use the word attempted intentionally, attempted to tell Reverend Al Sharpton what he would and would not say and what he would and would not do upon visiting the border. They told him that those Border Patrol agents who've been using the horse reins and holding them very much like whips, like those, the slave masters did, were good people, and he was not going to disparage them. Reverend Al Sharpton had to tell them, I am my own man. And what you won't do is tell me what I can do and what I can't do and what I'll say and what I won't say. So you really need to be on your way. We then approached the border. We boarded, got in cars and drove to the border. And the first thing I saw that kind of, shook me once again was a wall. Remember that beautiful wall that 45 talked about, how he was going to create or expand the wall? I saw the wall. And it ran for, I'm told it ran for 2.2 miles. It ran as far as I could see. Knowing that it was a wall that was there to keep people from other lands from entering the United States, just again shook me because, there were no such walls when the Europeans were coming over here, getting on their ships. There were no walls, at the ports. They were just allowed to come on in. So I saw the wall, and then we went behind the wall and we traveled another maybe 15, 20 minutes, barren land, dust kicking up everywhere as we drove. And then we got to the bridge that essentially runs from Del Rio, Texas to the to the Mexico border. So from the US Del Rio border to the Mexico border. And when we approached that bridge, I began to see Haitian persons, and I say this intentionally, persons of a darker hue. What again shook me was the numbers. People in close proximity to one another, not having room to lay down and sleep. Not everybody. Some were sitting, but many were standing because there wasn't enough room. I saw individuals and families with bags, shopping bags that contained all of their worldly, earthly possessions. I saw children on the hips of their mothers and their fathers, some with tears that had streamed down their faces. But get this, the tears had dried up in the hot sun, the hot conditions, 95-degree weather, before the tears could essentially be wiped from their mothers and their fathers' faces. The tears had dried up, and what you saw was their salt-stained faces. I saw looks of desperation and of trauma in Black persons, women and children and men and fathers and mothers. Most of them, we were told, were under the age of 40. We're told that they had traveled as many as 5,000 miles, from South America and Central America to come to the border. They'd come there because essentially in places like Chile and Brazil, the government essentially was no longer open to having them there. They'd come back after 2010 as many nations were gearing up and having to prepare for the Olympics. And, there was a boost of jobs and opportunity. With COVID, those opportunities essentially had become less to the point of being non-existent. And Haitian persons were no longer welcomed in these countries. And so they'd heard that maybe there'd been a better opportunity under this new Biden administration. And so they came to America. They gave us a tour, showed us the porta potties where persons, relieved themselves. Remember, there were as many as 15,000 people at one time. Some say 20,000. They had 60 porta potties. We were told that there was no running water. There were no places where they could shower. There were no sinks provided outside of those porta potties. We were told that maybe if people had bathed themselves in the Rio Grande, the water they passed through to get to the border, the United States side of the border, then they had bathed themselves if they'd done it in the Rio Grande. But some had been there for as many as 2 weeks. And if they hadn't bathed in the Rio Grande, they hadn't bathed in 2 weeks. We did see off in the distance that they had hoses where they were essentially watering down roads, seeking to pave roads, but they weren't using that water that they were able to bring in via pipes to help people bathe. and to keep the conditions sanitary. Food, they were very proud of the food that they had. They had water and they had processed foods, but they were all packaged. We didn't see, whether or not they were looking at dietary conditions and necessary restrictions. Health wise, I asked, being an organization here in New York City doing a lot to raise awareness about COVID and how to avoid the spread of COVID, I asked about what they were doing to help spread help reduce the risk of spread. I couldn't believe it when the highest United States health official said, "Well, these pretty people are pretty healthy, and we haven't seen much of a breakout. We have seen some bacterial infections, and we think that may have something to do with them drinking the water in the Rio Grande while others are bathing themselves. But, knock on wood, no real COVID spread." So I asked, "Are you offering the vaccine?" "No, we're not doing that." "Are you doing COVID tests?" "No, we're not doing that, but we've been pretty lucky so far." And all I could think to myself was, wait a minute. The Biden administration has upheld the Trump administration's Title 42 ban on people coming into the United States from other countries during a pandemic because they are fearful of the spread of COVID. But yet, you have better than 15,000 people here at the border. We could see a big COVID outbreak, and you're not testing? You're not offering the vaccine? Isn't that hypocritical? That's what I saw.
Maria, what is it that you're thinking at this point?
I'm thinking that everything Jennifer is sharing is just, it builds on the history of how Haitian people have been treated, not just in this country, but globally. Haiti was the first Black independent country, right, in 1804. And ever since that achievement, right, there has been this, you can call it conspiracy, you can call it a plan, you call whatever you want to call it, but there has been a deliberate marginalization and cutting off of Haiti. They control the resources that go to Haiti. At one point, there were countries who were told not to trade with Haiti. If you trade with Haiti, then we won't trade with you. So for me, this is just something that is continuing. I think it was back in maybe it was the 90s, where we saw a lot of immigrants coming in by boat, particularly from Cuba. And Cuban immigrants were allowed to stay if they were a certain complexion. Haitian people, and they used to call them the Haitian boat people, right? I think you all might remember some of this. They were sent back. They were either detained and then sent back, or they were turned around and denied access. And so when Jennifer shares what she sees at the border, it just brings back the same way those visual images brought back those images of an overseer and a slave master. It brings back the same kind of image of how historically we have been treating Haitian people.
Yeah.
And we meaning the US.